Hi, I'm so happy that you clicked this video and that you chose to watch my testimony, and I hope that God speaks to you through my experiences and through what he did for me, and I hope that this video helps you to understand his heart and what he truly wants to do in your life and what your true purpose is on this earth. I pray that you learned something. I pray that you are blessed. And if you are not a believer, I pray that God plants a seed in your heart today and that you feel one step closer to understanding who he truly is. I pray that the Holy Spirit convicts you in the deepest parts of your heart and in your spirit. I pray that you are given the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and that in all things you always refer back to God's word for guidance and pray to him, and he will always give you the answer that you're looking for. Okay, and the last thing that I want to mention before my testimony actually begins is that I initially filmed these videos on TikTok, and I kind of just used iMovie and kind of just pieced them all together to create one long video because I believe that God wants me to share this on as many platforms as I can. I know a lot of people don't use TikTok. I know a lot of people that are younger do, so that is why I started by posting it there. And today I felt like he wanted me to place it on YouTube because I know a lot of people watch YouTube. I know I do, and a lot of people in my generation do. I guess that I should probably also introduce myself because we're about to get really personal here. My name is Julia. I'm 28 years old, and I would say that I started my walk with Jesus about 2 years ago. And actually after this one, I'm also going to post what my journey with him has looked like so far, and I know that could be different for everybody, but I will share that all in my next video, and I'm going to title it My Walk with Jesus. So I'm going to get going with the testimony now, and I hope you guys enjoy. God bless. When I was a child growing up, my family was Catholic. My parents split up when I was 7 months old. They were young, it didn't work out, but they were both from Catholic homes. So I would go and see my dad every second weekend, and I think when I was about a year old, my mom met my stepdad, who was an atheist. My mom wasn't really practicing, so when I was at home, I just lived my life like anybody else. But when I would go to visit my dad for the weekend, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents who were very religious. I always went to church when I was there. My grandma had me dressing modestly. She taught me everything that she knew about God. And I remember being a kid and having a close relationship with God. But my relationship with him was very fear-based. I remember coloring in my room and talking to him and thinking about something that I did that was a sin. And I remember asking him, am I going to go to hell for this? So essentially, I was terrified of him. I didn't know who he truly was. Any questions that I had went unanswered, or I was told to look in a catechism book, or I'll get back to you later. It just never really made sense to me, and I remember thinking that he was mean and hateful, and how could he send the children that he loves to hell, and why do people die, and why do good people die so horribly sometimes? And these were questions that plagued me, and I just couldn't understand. And this created a huge separation between me and him. So I stopped praying. I still tried my best to be a good person and to follow the morals and the principles of the Bible, but I completely cut God out of my life. So when I was a teenager, I always found myself attracted to people who were like broken, because at home I kind of felt like the black sheep. My mom and my stepdad, who I mentioned earlier, had 2 sons, my half-brothers. We would get into a lot of fights as siblings do, and they liked to tell me that, you know, you don't belong here, why are you even here? Our dad isn't your dad. Why don't you go live with your own dad? We don't want you here. Meanwhile, my dad was dating a person who was very immature and didn't treat me very well either. She was a lot younger than him and very selfish. She was unable to accept me as her own child, which is fine. But I had a lot of issues where I felt like there was nowhere that I belonged. I felt like no matter where I went, nobody wanted me around. So I kind of searched for people who also felt unloved to be my friend group. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna confuse you guys a little bit because I want to take a couple steps back for a second. I wasn't gonna share something, but God placed it on my heart that it's important, so I'm gonna share it. When I'm talking about this stepmom being immature, I was under-exaggerating a little bit. She would do absolutely anything and everything in her power to try to destroy my relationship with my dad. And because of the conditions of the home that I lived in with my mom and my stepdad, by conditions I mean feeling unwanted there, my dad was kind of my everything to me when I was a kid. He was my escape from my world. He would take me out to dinners and we would go to movies, and I didn't get to see him very often, so when I did, he tried to make it an occasion to remember. He'd take me on road trips to amusement parks. He always made sure that I felt loved when I was with him, and I always did. But this woman did everything in her power to destroy that. I mean, everything. Anytime my dad came to pick me up or to come to one of my dance recitals or anything that had to do with me, she would throw some sort of huge tantrum, make it about her, and give her any attention. She had a daughter as well before they met, and how my dad didn't give her attention and why didn't he take her out and do these things. She would go out with her friends and get so drunk that my dad would have to go and collect her and carry her into the house, and she'd be punching him and screaming. She would make up lies about me, saying that I would do things to her daughter, and basically just tried to change my dad's view of me when nothing else was working. And she pushed so hard with all of this that eventually he didn't really know who to believe anymore. And if I'm honest, it broke me because I've always been the kind of person that I can't stand the thought of ever hurting anybody. I can honestly say that I was never mean to her daughter, not once. And even with all of the crap that this woman pulled, I still was nice to her. I still ignored my better judgment and tried to give her a chance again and again. Because in all honesty, she was nice to my face. It was only mean when you weren't around, or if at least she thought I wasn't listening. And of course, now being an adult and my dad's no longer with her, he's told me all of the stuff that she would do and say. And I already knew, but anyways, all of that because I feel like that's going to be important later. I'm going to fast forward back to where I was talking about the people that I would hang out with as teenagers. So at 13, I want to say. So in 8th grade, I smoked weed for the first time. I had a friend of mine at school who basically stole a lot of it from his dad and brought it to school. By the end of the day, he was super paranoid because you could smell it coming out of his locker. And he literally started just racing around the schoolyard, shoving like large amounts into people's bags and pockets and coats. People he knew, obviously. So another friend of mine knew what it was, and she basically rolled it up. Her and I walked home and we smoked this weed. Basically, that day was a huge turning point in my life because, spoiler alert, I got extremely addicted to this stuff, and it ended up being a gateway for so much more to come into my life. It became part of my everyday life. I started hanging out with other people who smoked it. Whenever you smoke with somebody, you have like these deep, like profound talks about the universe and life and things that go on, and it just feels so far beyond yourself. Like, how did I come up with this? But that's to be talked about more later. So I'm gonna fast forward a bit to when I was 16. And I started hanging out with my pot dealer. I was still in the 10th grade, maybe the 11th grade. And basically, this guy was 33 years old. And he would talk to me about basically how broken he was. And I felt so bad for him, like he was this little wounded bird. Recently lost his mom and his brother in such a short time span, and this guy was lost. So we started hanging out. He would pick me up from school after class, bring me food, bring me to hang out. Hanging out with this guy just felt so easy. It just came so naturally, and it was really easy to be myself. A lot of the people that I hung out with, like the girls that I hung out with, were very strong characters, very dominating, very opinionated. I kind of felt like I was their property, and some of them were actually really terrible to me, and looking back, I have no idea why I hung out with them, but I think that kind of all stems back to my stepmom and feeling like I needed to be good enough for her, could see my dad and like live in peace. And I mean, one of these girls in particular was so terrible to me in the sense that anytime I liked a boy, she would sleep with that boy. I remember I was a virgin and I wasn't very like provocative. I didn't have any boyfriends prior to this. So if I ever said that I liked somebody, she would make sure that she snatched them up before I ever had a chance. But for some messed up reason, I still hung out with her, and I still lied to myself and told myself that she wanted the best for me and that she cared for me and whatever else. I just totally let her abuse me and walk all over me, and that's part of my nature, to try to see the best in people and ignore the bad. But I didn't have Jesus, so all of this happened and ultimately led to literally my destruction, which will be coming up shortly. I'm sorry, I'm gonna try and speed this up. So I trusted this guy. He had no idea who this girl I'm talking about was, so I didn't feel like she could steal him from me. He was older and more mature, from what I thought, and I felt safe with him because he was wounded like me, right? Anyways, we started dating, and he was nicer to me than anybody ever had been. I truly thought he loved me. I didn't care that he was like 15, 16 years older than me. Everybody who cared about me told me, Julia, what the heck are you doing? Why are you with this guy? He's way too old for you. But I didn't care. He gave me the love and attention that I'd been looking for my whole life, until a few months in. It was like all of a sudden one day I woke up and he wasn't giving me the attention and showing me the care that I was so used to him showing me. Anything that he did do, it was like he did it out of obligation, like he felt like he had to. I found out he was doing hard drugs, he was doing cocaine at parties with friends. Basically, it turned into an abusive relationship where I felt like I needed to make this guy happy. I felt like it was my duty to save him and to bring him back to the side of the light. The guy was somehow capable to break him out of his sadness. See, now that was never my job. So because I wanted that same love, that same affection, and that same treatment that he gave me in the beginning, I folded. And I decided one day, I said, I want to do it with you. So now I'm really going to fast forward. So we would get high, smoke weed, do cocaine, we'd play video games, we'd go to parties and drink all night long till like the wee hours of the morning. This is where my life really spiraled downwards and where I really lost any self-worth that I had left. It's quite literally the beginning of the end. So I dated this guy for roughly 5 years of my life. And in that time, he just became more and more distant, which turned to emotional abuse and verbal. But for some reason, I just stuck around. I felt like I was indebted to this guy. I felt like I was never going to be loved anywhere else. So I stuck around. We would get into really huge fights and break up from time to time. I forgot to mention that I left high school at that point when I met him and started dating him. But after about 6 months to a year, I decided to go back, and I ended up doing a co-op at a mechanic shop nearby as an apprentice. So I would leave early in the morning and go to work. And I remember it was my first day. So once I went back to school, I started staying at my mom's again. My work was literally like a 2-minute walk from his house. And when I got there in the morning, I realized that I had forgotten my logbook at his house. So I went there to go get it. And when I showed up, he was in bed with another girl, someone who was also double my age, And as you can imagine, I lost it. He made some excuse about how she had just broken up with a boyfriend and she just wanted someone to cuddle with. And I remember that I was so hurt. I was so hurt. I couldn't believe that he would betray me in that way. It also really offended me for some reason, because at this point I think I was like 17. And my thought process was, you are dating a young, kind of beautiful girl, and I'd completely changed myself for him. I started dressing in more like form-fitting, provocative style clothes. I gave myself to him 100%, if you know what I mean. And I let go of my moral code 100% for this man. Quite literally. So I was so offended that he would do that to me, especially with someone who is his age. Not that older women are less beautiful than younger women, but this was my mentality at the time. I was 17. But in the end, he convinced me that all they did was cuddle, that he was just being a friend. I'd met this woman before, and I chose to believe him. And throughout our relationship, he went on to cheat a few more times that I know of. But if I share all of that, I'm literally going to be here all day. So like I said, there were periods in our relationship when we broke up. And during one of those times, I decided to basically do like an upgrading style course. Like I went to a school with other people who were trying to get the rest of their high school education when they were too old to do so at school with the rest of the high school kids. So in that course, I met new friends. Keep in mind, I wasn't doing drugs at this point. I was smoking weed, but I was trying to clean myself up. So in that program, I actually started hanging out with this guy whose name I'm not going to mention because the purpose of this is not to call anybody out. But we started hanging out. We would play video games. I would drive him to school every day. So some nights he would come over and play video games at my parents' house, and he would just spend the night on the couch. So this went on for a couple months, and, you know, low-key, I kind of had a crush on this guy. He was really easy to hang out with, and I thought, you know, maybe things are really going to change. Maybe life is going to finally turn around. Because hanging out with him was cool. It was easy. We were just like homies, you know? He was really polite to my parents. My brothers liked him, and I wanted to do things differently. So I'm like, you know, we're taking it slow. We're friends. But we would flirt here and there, and it was like, I really thought that that was going to turn into something. And then one night, he took it upon himself to come into my room while I was sleeping. So I woke up with him on top of me, and I'm not going to go into detail, but things happened. He wasn't using protection, and literally this was over in a span of like a few minutes. I didn't want it to happen. He did not have my permission. This was something he just decided to do at his own accord at like 3 a.m. Before I knew it, it was over, and he acted really weird after this. I remember the next morning, I drove him to school as normal. He didn't really talk much. He was acting really awkward. And then after this, he just stopped talking to me. I tried to reach out to him a few times, but it was just really awkward, and I could feel that he didn't want to talk to me, and I felt like crap, to be honest. It was extremely degrading. Fast forward like 6 weeks, 7 weeks passed, and I realized I didn't get my period. So I was in class one day, and I was doing a Native American Studies class in this upgrading program that I was in. And that day we were doing a smudge. So we went outside, and it's where you put sage in a bowl and you burn it, and it's supposed to like cleanse you of negative energy. But in this circle of like 15 people, all of the smoke from the smudge bowl, no matter where my teacher went, who was holding it, all of the smoke came to me in like copious amounts. So that day at the end of class, my teacher and my friend, who was Native, approached me and asked me, they basically pulled me aside and very quietly and with concern, they asked me if I was pregnant. Because they said that supposedly pregnant women aren't supposed to attend smudging sessions because they will actually steal all of the cleansing smoke from everybody else in the circle. Sure enough, that day I went home and took a pregnancy test. Lo and behold, I was pregnant. So this guy had been avoiding me for weeks at school. And I was scared, and I messaged him and I told him that I was pregnant. And he was really rude and messed up. He told me, no offense, but you are the last person that I want to be the mother of my children. And you should get rid of it. So after weeks of feeling broken and lost and scared, I talked to my stepdad about this. And he convinced me that I didn't want to bring a child into the world on those terms. And God forbid if I ended up back with my ex, spoiler alert, I did, that I would want him to claim this child as his own and then be stuck to him for my entire life. And because I came from a broken family, I didn't want to bring a child into the world on those terms either, where that child wouldn't have both of his parents all the time, or her parents. I always promised myself that I would wait until marriage and wait until I was with a person that I could be with forever, so that my children didn't have to go through the pain that I did growing up. So my dad took us on a big fancy trip to Costa Rica, and we made an appointment in Toronto to basically have the procedure done at the end of the trip. And I had the abortion. And I can tell you straight up that I've never regretted anything more in my entire life. I went into that appointment, they did an ultrasound, and asked me if I wanted to know if it was twins. And I said no, even though you basically told me it was. But at that point, I'd already convinced myself that this is what I needed to do. And I went through with it. And I remember feeling so empty after and lost. I felt like a murderer, and there's no way to go back from that decision. What's done is done. And I got super depressed after this. I started sleeping around with a ton of different men, playing people, and then I ended up going back to my ex. It had been a while since we dated, and at this point, so I forgot to mention earlier that he was a drinker. And he told me he quit drinking, and the way that he did that was, in order to help him with the withdrawals, he started doing oxys with one of his friends. He said it kind of like softened the edge of the shakes and whatever else happens. Spoiler alert, I started doing it too. Because shortly after that, my grandfather died. The one who I mentioned in the beginning who was Catholic, and him and my grandma taught me a lot about God when I was a kid. And they used to babysit me a lot when I was a child, and his loss just threw me over a new edge of broken. That night of his funeral is the night that I tried Oxycontin for the first time. And this is where I fell even further. As you can imagine, it didn't take long before I was addicted. And this happened around 2012, 2013. Basically, they stopped making the Oxycontin that was crushable or snortable or smokable, which is what I was doing. And that's when fentanyl started to circulate. So because I wasn't able to get my drug of choice, a friend of mine presented me with fentanyl and told me, guess what? You can smoke it and it's 10 times as strong. I'm gonna have to put a trigger warning on these videos. So I started smoking fentanyl off of tinfoil, and this drug just took away all of my problems. It felt like it made me feel powerful, like a superhero or something. Like I could physically do anything. I felt no pain, physical or mental or emotional. I didn't care anymore about what anybody thought of me. I didn't care about anything that happened to me or anyone in my life. I didn't care about myself or what I did to my body or my temple. I started doing things like creating bank accounts and depositing empty envelopes and then withdrawing the maximum amount of cash that I could. I did this at many banks. And fun fact, I actually can't get a bank account at those banks to this day. I started sleeping people with drugs or money for drugs, including my fentanyl dealer, who is like one of the big kingpins in the town I'm from. I also started dealing. So I should mention that while all of this was going on, I was still dating my ex. He knew I was sleeping with these drug dealers for drugs so that we could both get high together. He didn't care, as long as he got his fix too and as long as I shared. I had no real friends except other addicts, and that is when his abuse turned from emotional and mental to physical. We started getting in screaming matches and arguments. He tried choking me out multiple times. I ended up in the hospital with 2 boxer's fractures, one in each hand, because he would attack me and I would get so angry that I would actually like punch walls and stuff, and that's how I broke my hands. He'd hold me up against the wall by my throat. I actually broke my nose trying to headbutt him so that he would let me go. This went on for another year or so, but I promise the good stuff's coming. So my parents knew that all this stuff was going on, and throughout all of this, my mom was trying to pursue me. My stepdad was trying to pursue me. All of the people who truly loved me were trying to save me from this and bring me back. My mom actually got into kind of like a high-speed chase with me one day when she saw me coming from my dealer's house. She followed me all through town in her vehicle, and no matter how fast I drove or how dangerously I drove to try and get away from her, my mom was right on my tail, because that's a mother's love. And one day she took me aside. I had just been dropped off by the police. My ex had been arrested for domestic abuse, and I had a restraining order from him. And my mom and my stepdad brought up the idea of rehab. My mom found the nicest rehab she could find across the country, and they paid tens of thousands of dollars so that I could go there and be treated. They begged me. I was at a point where I was so lost, I was so broken. I tried killing myself multiple times. I tried overdosing, and I would smoke so much to the point where I would nod off and pass out and think I was dead. Everything would go black, and somehow I would wake up every time. I was doing amounts that should have killed me, but I see now that this was God keeping me alive because he had a purpose for me. And he never gave up on me, and his love was truly shown to me through my parents at this time. I promised I wasn't gonna cry. I've said this story so many times, I don't. But anyways, I was at the end of my rope. I was at my rock bottom and I couldn't do it anymore. So I went to rehab for my parents and for myself, because I had no other options at that point. I couldn't quit myself. I knew I needed help, so I went to Nova Scotia. I wasn't kidding when I said this was going to be a long testimony, and I'm just going to preview the fact that rehab is not where it ended for me. But I went. It was the most beautiful experience that I've ever had in my life, up until I found Jesus. I made some amazing friends. This rehab was very based in like Native American culture. It was very close to a reserve. So it was a lot of spiritual healing, group therapy, smudges, that kind of thing. Cleansing of all negativity. We did a lot of like ritualistic stuff where like we would write down our traumas on paper, rip them up and burn them as a symbol of those things being caught up in the smoke and going back into the universe. This was the beginning of the whole new age part of my testimony, because I thought it saved me. I felt renewed, and that was the only time I needed to go to rehab. And in rehab, I met a guy. They tell you not to date in rehab, but we found a way. And this guy had a huge impact on my healing. He was there for alcohol, I was there for opiates, so I figured, we could be strong for each other. We were sneaking around. At night, I would go to his room, he would come to my room, and I'm sure you can fill in the blanks of what would happen. And basically, we left on the same day. We took the plane together. This was pre-pandemic, so we sat next to each other on the plane. And we'd made arrangements with our parents that I was going to go and spend a couple days where he's from. It's a city somewhere down south and near around the GTA. And I was going to check it out because I was thinking of moving there and starting fresh. He told me about Sheridan College, and I decided to take a course there in general arts and sciences, because I wanted to be with this man. But God had another plan for me. So while I was staying in this town with this man in a hotel, it turns out he had a warrant for his arrest. We were playing cards in the hotel. It was like 11 p.m. at night, and all of a sudden we hear a knock on the door. "Open up, police!" I had no idea that there was a warrant out for this guy's arrest, but it turns out he was on probation, and when he got out of rehab, which was court-ordered, he was supposed to stay at his parents' house for the remainder of his probation. But he was at a hotel with me. So they arrested him. I was stuck in this town that I'd never been to before. I had no idea where I was. But his dad called me. This man was he was so nice. He knew I wasn't from around there, so he paid for another night's stay at that hotel and a bus ticket for me to get home. So I went home. But once I was home, all I could think about was this guy. How we were like meant to be with each other, like star-crossed lovers. I never went back to my ex, by the way. So I made plans and I moved to this city. I started attending Sheridan College, and It had been months and I hadn't heard from this guy. I didn't know if he was still in prison, if he got out, no idea. But in the back of my mind, I was always hoping that I would hear from him soon. That someday I was just going to get a text and he was going to say, come meet me. And because I was in the same city, I'd be able to hop on a bus and be right there. But months went by and I kind of got over this idea and realized, like, hey, maybe he doesn't want to talk to me. I don't know. I didn't hear from him till years later, by the way. But I was falling in love with this school. I made friends. I was loving my program. I felt so free from the addiction that had me trapped for years. My life was looking up. I was positive. I was happy. I had carried on with the things that I'd learned in rehab. I was still smudging. I was still trying to manifest my future. I felt like I had manifested this new reality that I was in, where I was positive and happy and I had a future. I was still smoking weed, but I didn't really see that as an addiction, right? And one day, I was at this little coffee shop that was next to the pub in my college. And obviously I was grabbing a coffee. And somebody calls my name from behind me. And voila, it's a group of 4 guys from my class that I'd never talked to before. We had a test coming up. I think it was in sociology or philosophy, one of the two. And a guy from their friend group asked me if I wanted to sit with them and study. And I was like, heck yeah. Because I felt like this was kind of meant to be, right? So I sat down with these guys and we studied. And these guys became my new friend group. I started hanging out with them all the time. We would study, we'd sit together in class, we would go out to lunch between classes together, we would go drinking together at pub nights at my school. And there was this one guy in our group that was very quiet, but very sweet and intriguing, and I kind of liked him. So I started hanging out with this group of guys, and I'm having a blast. What I forgot to mention was that when I first moved there, I was hanging out with a bunch of other stoners. I had a couple roommates who were guys, and one of my roommates had his friends over all the time. So I ended up hanging out with them, obviously. And we would all hang out, smoke weed, drink, go for cruises in the car, all of us stoned. Which is illegal, I know. But at the heart, these guys were pure. They were really great guys, and honestly, I needed them when I first moved there. I really did. Because I was alone, I was scared. It was a new place, and without them, I probably would have moved back home. And then God knows where I would be. So back to the present, I'm hanging out with these guys, and I really like this one guy in the group. But one of the other guys in my friend group clearly had a thing for me. He would pick me up and drive me to school all the time, take me on tours of the city, ask me to study alone with him all the time. And he was actually closest out of the friend group to the guy that I had a crush on. And being the sweetheart that he is, he felt like his friend, who had already vocalized that he liked me, deserved a shot. So, being the good guy he was, he pushed me towards his friend. He was always asking me, oh, do you like him? You know, like, he really likes you, like, and I didn't, so every time he asked me, I would tell him, no, I don't like him. So one night, he invited the guy that I liked and me to his house to watch. I think it was like Breaking Bad or something. And we were drinking, and I got brave, and I told this guy that I liked him. And it turns out he liked me too. The guy who initially liked me, the guy who I liked's friend, this is really confusing not being able to use names, kind of turned out to be a jerk. I found out a lot of really messed up stuff that he was doing while we were hanging out. Like, I would get up to leave the room, and he would check my phone and look through my messages. And he was telling the guy I liked that things happened between us when absolutely nothing did. The guy never even told me he was interested in me, although it was kind of easy for me to tell. So basically, it wasn't until I filled in all those blanks for him and told him the truth that he realized that this guy had kind of been playing him the whole time. He didn't actually like me, he just liked me and wanted to, So after all of this being found out, that sense of loyalty that he had to his friend kind of diminished, and we started dating. I realized that this has been really long, and honestly, God bless you, and I'm grateful for you if you are still watching up until this point. But I promise you, this is when God starts to come into the story. This is when I really started to see his hand working in my life. It was just about finding out who he was and where he was. But It's still a lengthy story from this point on. Maybe I should have made a YouTube video instead. I just feel like a lot of us cut our testimony so short, and as convenient as that seems, and it seems so much easier to just kind of like blurt it out, I think that every single thing, every single trial that we go through in our lives is so important in the big picture. And I'm afraid that if I leave out any details at all, that I'm taking away from the message of what he truly did in my life, you know? This is all for his glory, and I don't want to leave anything out, because I know that everything I went through had purpose. I know that there's someone out there who needs to hear this, and if I leave out any details of what I went through, I may risk relating with somebody out there. And I want everybody from all walks of life, from all corners of darkness, at all ends of the earth, no matter how weighed down you are with sin, no matter how heavy you are, that weight you carry is not too much for God. There is nothing that you can do on this earth that is too bad or too gone or too broken to be restored by Jesus. That is a promise. That is something that I know with every fiber of my being. So I want to share everything, the good and the bad, every step along the way, so that you know where I came from, what I went through, and how God restored me in the end. So I really hope that you stick around. So when this man and I started dating, it was like euphoric. I'd felt connected to people before, but never like this. This was exactly what I always imagined it would feel like to be with my soulmate. I told him the story that I'm telling you guys now, maybe even in further detail, when it was fresh and raw, when I was still weighed down by everything that I'd been through and everything that happened to me and everything that I'd done. I sat down with him, and in one evening, I poured out my heart to this man. And he looked at me like I was the most beautiful and pure human being that he's ever come across in his entire life. I've never connected with a human being the way that I did with him. That night, we set a date that we were gonna go on like an actual formal date, and he was all I thought about. He showed up with flowers in the cutest little outfit I've ever seen in my life, all spiffed up, and this is where it's gonna get a little corny, but we fell in love so fast. We told each other that we loved each other. I think on our third date, he came to my house and he never left. He still lived with his parents, so he would go home, I think at 3 a.m, just so that in the morning when his mom woke up, he was home. And then as soon as she left for work, he would wake up, gather everything that he needed to get ready, his clothes for school that day, and he was back at my house at 6 a.m. to wake me up. Literally a fairy tale. And this is where, looking back, I really see God's hand in my life. Then I just thought the universe was finally working in my favor. I didn't believe in God. I believed there was a God, the universe, and karma. We got engaged. He was also born and raised Catholic, so because of where I was in my life, I finally felt like the universe was in my favor. I decided to give another shot to the religion that I was raised in and the God that I knew when I was young. I started going to church with him on the weekends, having spiritual conversations with his mom, talking to my grandma about God again. This is where I'm going to start to speed things up. So, no matter what I did, I could not feel a connection to God. This is where I really started to struggle. Because I knew that someone saved me. It wasn't coincidence or a fluke that I got to where I was. But I couldn't find him. In this timing, my mom became a Jehovah's Witness. Before that, she was practicing light magic. She was a white witch. And over the years, she had taught me a lot of things that she knew. And when I was feeling down, she would kind of just hand me her book of spells and tell me to take a cleansing bath, and just kind of like give me a book of different rituals that I could perform to make myself feel better, to cleanse my energy. But anyway, some stuff was going on in her life, and what I went through really took a toll on her, and she was lost. And in that time, a Jehovah's Witness came to her door, and she felt like it came in the right time of her life. And that's what she did. She started studying with witnesses, and she had this newfound zeal for God and just completely turned her life around. So naturally, I thought, this is where the truth is. They're claiming they have the truth. This must be the truth. So this guy I was dating, now engaged to, we also started studying with a couple that lived near us. They were the sweetest couple ever. We loved them so dearly. They were kind, and we just felt that they really knew what they were talking about, and we loved doing studies with them. It was great. I felt like I was learning so much about the Bible, but I didn't feel like I was getting any closer to God. No hate, only love to those out there that are Jehovah's Witnesses. But I just felt like it was very law-based, very works-based, and like the Watchtower was more about how can God serve you? How can reading the Bible make your life better? And I didn't like that. That's not what I was looking for. So once again, I turned completely away from the Bible, along with my fiance. And this is where I started to go back into darkness again, but this time on a whole new level. My husband and I started smoking weed together. He wasn't into it before. I think I said husband, but I meant fiance. We weren't married at the time. Spoiler. But this is when I really started seeing synchronicities around me, and I kind of turned back to the universe. Because at this point I was starting to feel like the Bible was just empty. Like it was dead. I started seeing angel numbers everywhere. I was seeing 1111, 333, 444, you name it. I was seeing it. And I started researching what these numbers meant. I started thinking my angels were trying to communicate with me. I decided to take a course online because I had started realizing all of the chemicals and stuff that are in our food, in our products. I started researching GMOs and big pharma and all of that stuff, all of these things that are like conspiracies. And I wanted to clean up my life. I wanted to clean up my health, get into the best shape I'd ever been in. I started meditating, and I felt so spiritual. I just felt so connected to Source. I felt like I was one with the universe, and I felt like I had purpose. I thought I was a light worker, a star seed. This is when I started manifesting again. I lost a bunch of weight. This is when I really started to realize that I had the power to change my own reality. I could literally shape the world around me. I took a course in holistic nutrition. I started learning about how to heal my body, heal my spirit, learning about how the condition of our mind has such a big effect on the condition of our body and common diseases and things of that nature. And this really became my new religion. And I felt so powerful. I started to think that I was some sort of angelic being, like meant to wake up the masses and help people become their true selves and to vibrate at their highest frequency and to find their higher self, to become that higher self. So this led into meditation and opening myself up to instruction, opening gateways to my spirit guides. I'm going to fast forward quite a bit through this part because it's long. I think I already mentioned it, but I got into like the best shape of my life. And I just felt like I was so happy, so fulfilled. But really there was still this like hole in me, this hole in my spirit, and I was still longing for something. So I kept searching. It was like on to the next thing, on to the next thing. From there, I started researching paganism and witchcraft. I discovered that you could be a good witch, that it wasn't all bad, and figured, well, that's gotta be good, right? I've always loved watching movies about witches. I have always felt drawn to the supernatural, to the whimsical, to fairy tales, to magic. I was obsessed with any movies that had to do with the occult. I love the idea of fairies. I actually always wanted to be a fairy. And a huge part of me had always wanted to believe that that was real. So when I discovered communities online of real witches, I remember I was so excited. I thought, oh my gosh, what if this is what I am and I just never knew it? What if I have magic inside me and that is where my purpose lies? That is why I'm this light worker. I'm meant to help people through things like Reiki healing. And I mean, my mom was a witch, but I never believed that she was actually a witch, you know? So when I went into this journey, this community, I went all in. I started doing tarot readings. I had started kind of learning like scribing and channeling different spirits. I thought of like summoning my own spirit guide. But then when I did a little bit of deeper research, some witches were actually warning of doing that when you're too new, and I was a baby witch. And the last thing that I wanted to do was summon some dark entity or channel something that I couldn't handle. So thank God I didn't, that I knew of. So I was putting together my book of shadows. I was learning from a bunch of other witches. I even had a woman in my current area who was a pagan, who I bought a lot of occult items from, who had offered to teach me what she knows. Keep in mind, my then fiance was in school to be an aviation maintenance engineer. So I had kind of told him what I was dipping into, but I never actually fully filled him in. And I've actually told him, obviously now, at this point. And he said, and I quote, "If I would have known that you were into that stuff then, and to the extent that you had gotten into it, I'm telling you, I think I would have been gone." Those were his words. And if it was reversed, I probably would have ran too, coming from like a Catholic Christian background. But yeah, things got pretty dark really fast. I was channeling music, writing really beautiful songs about the universe and the divine with really catchy, relatable lyrics. And most of the time I was on a high. But I had so many days where I felt like I was just so lost in this fog. Using the term fog is an understatement. I was in just sickening darkness, describing this darkness that I was in. And the best way to describe it was basically the way I saw myself was I was trapped inside my own mind in a cage, and I was looking at myself in that perspective from the third person, which was really confusing. But I just felt like I wasn't me anymore. It's really hard to explain, but it's like I was myself, but the real me was trapped within myself, and I just couldn't find my way out. At this time, I was having a lot of problems with my mental health. I was having days of like euphoria and excitement and extreme creativity. I mean, I was making art, whether it was painting or writing. I would start something and I would be at it for like 15 hours straight. My fiance would have to tell me, "Babe, it's time for bed. You've been at that for a long time." But I was just so filled with this euphoria and this creative drive to just keep going. I couldn't stop. And then I would have days where I was so low that I couldn't pick up a pen. All I would do was record videos of myself singing the most depressing music, smoke so much weed, and I was too depressed to feel sorry for myself. And this is where I kind of started to think I had a problem. This is when I stumbled on a video on the internet of a girl talking about her bipolar disorder and symptoms that she had of bipolar disorder. I had every single one. So the first thing I did was I ran to the clinic and got myself an appointment to speak with a psychiatrist. Fast forward a couple weeks or a month or something, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So now I'm on medication, antipsychotics, because I was diagnosed with bipolar type 1 with mania and psychotic tendencies or something like that, which made sense to me because I was losing my marbles. I had created a few salves using like wormswort and belladonna and stuff like that, and I was trying to astral project. And that night something happened. It was almost like something took over me and I lost it. I started screaming. My fiance couldn't calm me down. I was filled with so much anger and anxiety, and I can't even describe the emotion to you. I smashed a mirror, and I spent hours just sitting in the corner of my living room against the wall with a bottle of wine in the dark by myself that night. That night, when I finally went to sleep, I had a dream. I was sitting on the ground and I was performing some sort of like incantation. I can't remember what I was doing. And my grandfather's face, who had passed away, like I mentioned earlier, appeared on the wall next to me in my apartment living room. And he just looked at me with the most disappointed, sad, broken-hearted look on his face that I've ever seen. And he just kind of dropped his head down and he looked at me with this broken look on his face, and he just shook his head like he was so disappointed. And I still get goosebumps thinking about it. It was in that moment when I woke up that I thought the universe is trying to tell me something. At this point, I thought my grandpa's spirit was trying to get through to me. I thought he was in heaven watching me do this stuff. And I told this to my fiance the next day, and I knew right then that it was time to stop. I knew I was going in the wrong direction. I started to second guess everything that I'd been learning. And that's when I turned away, for the most part, from the New Age. But I still didn't know where God was. I didn't know where to look for him. I just stopped right there. I took everything off the altar I created, shoved it into drawers. I took off my jewelry and my pentagrams. What I didn't realize at that time that I was being convicted. I took down my dream catchers and put away my candles, my crystals, my tarot cards. It all got thrown in a drawer. And I just flat out stopped. I stopped everything and I gave up on my search for God for a while. I was so fed up at this point. I just continued taking my medication. I continued smoking weed. We'd moved into a new apartment. My brother actually moved out to where we lived to go to school with my fiance. So we moved and we basically just got a bigger place where we could all live together. And I just sat at home. I wasn't studying in my program anymore. I gave up on that. My medication really wasn't working. All that it did was numb me out to like a flat line, constantly flat line. I couldn't feel extremely happy or sad. And one day I came across a video on YouTube. I was obsessed with YouTube. And one day on my homepage, there was a suggestion for a video about a girl talking about Jesus. And at this point, this must have been God tugging at my heart, because I watched it. This girl was a Christian, and I just saw the joy and the love and the happiness in her voice. She was ecstatic. This girl was on fire for Jesus. And the way that she talked about him, the love that she had for him, was so intriguing to me. And it tugged at my heart so hard. I wanted to know this love that she had. This is what I had been looking for all of these years. I was so tired at this point of trying to do it on my own. No matter what avenue I explored, I came up empty-handed. I felt no love. The more knowledge that I received from the universe, the more empty that I felt, basically. I was searching and turning up fruitless, and it drove me bananas, literally. So I wanted what this girl had. So my brother had dropped out of his program. He was really struggling himself. We have a lot of depression and mental health disorders and issues in my family. And he was really struggling, and this was not his fault. But he would wake up some days so angry and be so hurtful and hateful towards me. I found myself having to tiptoe around him. I would say, "Hi, good morning. Like, I made some coffee. It's on the counter, whatever." And he would either ignore me, or I'd get like a "Ugh" kind of a response. He was really struggling with something too. And after days and months of this, it really started to take a toll on me. And one day we got in a really big argument, and we lived in the same house. I couldn't get away. And I was just so fed up that I cried out to God. And for the first time, I cried out to Jesus. I was just so weighed down. I was helpless at this point. Not only was I dealing with my own stuff and my own depression, but I was also dealing with my brother's, and he deals with a lot of anger. So when I'm depressed, I just kind of like shrink into myself. I don't talk to anybody. If someone does address me, I do my best to put a smile on my face and hide what I'm feeling. But my poor brother was and is plagued by something, and he's so angry when he's depressed that he will lash out at you. He will be rude to you. He will insult you. So I couldn't deal with it anymore. And in that moment, when I cried out to Jesus, I immediately felt this love greater than anything I could have ever imagined. This comfort, and it was like a huge hug that just embraced me, and I had never felt anything like it before. I had goosebumps. I felt so warm, and I could see every moment in my life that he'd tried to reach me. I knew he was real, without a shadow of doubt. With every particle of my being, I knew that he was the way and the truth and the life. I could literally see every wrong turn that I'd ever taken in my life. In that moment, he showed me that while I was searching the Bible, while I was reading his word, I wasn't calling out to him. I wasn't talking to him. And when I was young, when I was a Catholic, I was going through all the motions. Yes, I would talk to him. I would go to church, but I would only talk to him when I was afraid that I was in trouble, when I was afraid of the consequences of my actions. I never in my life had a true relationship with Jesus. All that I knew and understood was religion, doctrine, catechism. The only thing that I knew about repentance was telling a priest your sins and having to say a few Our Fathers and Hail Marys, and then all was well. I didn't know anything about what grace was. I didn't know why Jesus died on the cross for us. But in that moment, it felt like a flash, like it all happened in a second. I just knew. He showed me, and he gave me a response to every question that I ever had. And in that moment, I fell in love with him, and I decided to follow him. I would also like to point out that I was not made perfect in that moment. Sanctification is a process, and it's been a long process for me. I was saved over 2 years ago, and I still struggle. I'm still working towards it. I have gone through spiritual attack after spiritual attack ever since the day that I gave my life to Jesus. I have stumbled, I have fallen, I've gotten lost in confusion, because in my learning, in my reading of the Bible, I've misinterpreted things. I was led astray by false teachers, and it wasn't until recently that I truly understood the gospel. I understood it on the day that I was saved, but I am someone who second guesses myself a lot. And the second that I stop listening for the voice of the Holy Spirit and I start to follow my own understanding, that's when I'm in trouble. Those are the times that I've left a door open for the enemy to come in and deceive me. I got stuck in the prosperity gospel, and I got stuck at the other end where it was all about condemnation and works. These are all deceptions. The truth lies perfectly dead square in the middle of all of that. The Lord has been working really hard on me and on all of his children, because the enemy's out there to seek and to kill and destroy. He had us all once, and he does not want to let us go. He doesn't want us to share our testimony, because he knows how powerful they are. And he knows how many souls will be won for God when we are brave enough to open our mouths and share it. Being a Christian is not easy. That's not what we signed up for. But no matter how tough that it gets sometimes, God will never allow us to be tried any harder than we can handle. And I promise you that He is there to hold your hand every step of the way. He's there to guide you if you just give Him a chance. If you open up your heart to Him, you will never be dissatisfied. You will never be thirsty. I was constantly looking for truth. I was looking for the God of the universe. I always knew that there was a purpose for me in this life, that we weren't just here to fulfill our own desires and then die and be nothing. I never believed in science or evolution, and now I know. I finally feel that purpose and that completeness that I never felt as a child. I finally feel loved and accepted and wanted. And He took me in right where I was. I was covered in sin through and through. I was carrying a weight that I carried ever since I was a little kid.